don't be afraid what the world thinks, because life's far too short.
Hello, my loves. Welcome back to the Lavendaire Lifestyle Podcast. It's Eileen. Today on the podcast, I'm speaking with the famous anonymous poet Atticus, where we talk about poetry, art, anonymity, entrepreneurship, relationships, and more. Atticus, the anonymous New York Times bestselling author of Love Her Wild, The Dark Between Stars, and The Truth About Magic, has taken the world by storm with his beautiful poetry and powerful, simple themes of love and strength of the human spirit. His fourth poetry collection, LVOE, is an exploration of self-love, meditation, meaning, loss, and romance. LVOE is a look forward, a look backward, but most importantly, a look inward to the often confusing yet hopeful human experience. Hello, Atticus. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm great. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. I think you're very interesting. First off, you're my first anonymous guest.
Yeah, there's not that many of us.
Yeah. So can you tell us your story on how you became a poet and why you decided to remain anonymous?
Yeah, it's actually kind of serendipitous. So I never in a million years thought I was for one, I would have anything to say, and certainly didn't think I'd ever become a poet growing up. I was on this trip to France, and I had a lucky meeting with an actor, a guy named Michael Madsen. And I don't know if you know who that is, but he's like the bad guy from Kill Bill and Reservoir Dogs and a Justin Bieber music video. And him and I became quite close friends. And one of the things he taught me was that poetry had saved his life. And he'd struggled with addiction and trouble with the law and things. And he very much attributed poetry to saving his life. And this was really interesting for me, growing up as a guy in Canada. Here was this archetype of a badass kind of guy. And he was writing poetry. And I think that was the first time that someone kind of like an elder in the tribe had given me permission to explore like a more vulnerable side of myself. And it was a few days later, I was in Paris for also the first time I'd ever been there. And I wrote my first poem then.
And did you post it immediately?
I didn't post it immediately. So I came back from that trip, and I had an old typewriter there, and I was like, I'll just type it up on the typewriter. And someone saw it, and I was like, oh, you should post it on Instagram. And Instagram was kind of just getting started, and I was like, yeah, that sounds like a really cool idea. And you asked about the anonymity thing, and I was like, I'm going to do it anonymously, so it doesn't kind of bleed into the rest of my life. And I think if I'm honest with myself, I was like very shy about this like newfound passion at the time. And yeah, and so I was like, I'm going to do it anonymously. And the full story is about a few months after that, a friend passed away, and he was a friend who had a certain level of fame, quite a lot of fame. And he was from the same small island I was from. And he passed away in a hotel room in Vancouver.
Oh my gosh.
He was on the television show Glee. I always felt it was kind of complications of fame. And so, I kind of made a commitment to myself. Hey, no matter how big this gets, let's keep the anonymity. Let's keep the mask on.
Right. So you saw the dangers of fame and you really wanted to keep like your regular life, no matter what happened, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, a lot of people in that position would say that fame is a double-edged sword, and you've got to be really sure that it's what you want before you kind of get it. And, for me, it was an experiment, and it still is, of can you kind of spread art in the world? Can you spread your message and do it anonymously without kind of being recognized?
Yeah. Okay. I'm curious. You said that was when you got into poetry. So have you been writing or creating in other forms before you started writing poetry? Like, what was your life before?
Yeah. I mean, I've always had kind of creative outlets. I've always been very creative. I read a lot as a kid. I just read nonstop. And I remember thinking back, I remember my mom hid a Jack Kerouac book on my bookshelf. And of course, me being a 14-year-old kid, was convinced that discovered Jack Kerouac, but my mom was just very smart in how she planted it. And, I had these interactions with poets and writers, and I loved the classics. I loved the kind of the Bukowskis and Frosts of the world. And that's what got me into poetry. But I never thought I had anything to say. I still don't, but I think that's kind of the artist curse. But yeah, it happened very serendipitously, and it's been a wonderful journey of creativity. And I've met so many other young people who are writers and interacted. It's been a wonderful experience.
Right. I mean, what was that timeline like when you started posting as Atticus? Was it just a hobby for a while before it became a business? Like what was that story like?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I never expected it to be anything. And so I just started posting and then kind of got some traction and people started sharing it. And then I think Shay Mitchell, if you know who that is, wonderful human, I think she was one of the first people to find it, and she started posting it, and then lots of people started sharing it. And I think the big turning point was when people started getting the words tattooed, which as like a writer is very, very disarming because all you can think of is like, I hope there was good grammar in that.
Right.
But yeah, and then and then thousands of people started getting it tattooed, which was just, it's just a very humbling, huge surprise. And one thing I've always loved about the tattoos is that people kind of take the words and make them create their own meaning behind it and put it on their skin, and it becomes their art. It's like no longer mine. And I love that kind of transference of meaning and art. And I think that's what it's all about, really.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I guess in the beginning, what gave you the confidence to post your work, or was it easy because it was anonymous?
I think, like looking back, I think the fact that I'm anonymous has allowed me to just put a barrier between the account and the following and my words. I think it's helped me write truthfully, and it's very imperfect, obviously, but I do my best to write vulnerably, and it's a constant and consistent battle. But yeah, I think it really has helped me, and I do have that buffer. I sometimes forget people are kind of reading at all. And again, I think maybe it's the artist curse or the writer's curse, or maybe it's just me, but I never expect anyone to show up to anything. Like I never expect people to buy any of my books, or I never, I've done a couple book signings and things where I'll wear a mask and sign books, and I never expect someone to show up to that. And I'm very surprised when people do. So yeah, I think it has helped me just kind of remain hopefully true to the words.
Yeah, like I can tell that you truly are a creative, and you talk about that curse. I mean, do you still experience like that fear before sharing something, or how do you get over these insecurities as an artist?
Yeah, quite honestly, I think that being anonymous has helped me do that. I think it does take a lot of courage. I think luckily there are great communities of writers and artists and creatives online. And I think for the most part, they're very supportive of each other. So many people helped me as I was kind of coming up and getting my first book published, and people just helped a lot and sharing it. And so, along the way, I've tried to help a lot of people in the same way that I was helped. And I think I've helped, 15, 20 poets at this point just get their works published, and just like help them navigate through finding an editor, finding a publisher, or finding an agent, and just like when and where to publish. And so I think there's like a really cool ripple effect of that. But point being that the community is really supportive of each other, I think.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome that I guess we don't understand like behind the scenes that you're doing this kind of thing as well, like helping other poets, and right? That's like a whole other world.
Yeah. There is two sides to this thing, and I'm sure you find it in your world as well. But there's kind of like this balance of business and creativity, and it's hard to wear both hats, and it's hard to kind of switch from one to the other. But they're both kind of equally important. I really love both sides of it. I love the writing, and I love the kind of business side of things as well. So yeah, it just has always made sense. Just like so many people help me. Like why wouldn't I help people coming up? It makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Let's take a break for today's sponsor, Clinique. I always appreciate when a product is clinically tested to be effective, which is why I'm excited to partner with Clinique. Meet Clinique's first foundation designed to be the last step in your skincare routine. Even better, Clinical Serum Foundation is formulated with 3 serum technologies that visibly reduce dark spots, brighten, and hydrate the skin. I personally love when makeup can double as skincare, and that's exactly what this product is. Foundation doesn't do it justice. This is Clinical Foundation, built with 3 serum technologies, and it even gives UV protection. Available in 42 shades, this hydrating foundation formula provides buildable, medium to full coverage with a satin finish. In as little as 8 weeks, skin appears more even-toned, radiant, and smoother even after makeup is removed. Plus, the glass bottle is recyclable with its more sustainable packaging. Don't call it makeup. This is skincare in just your shade. Find your shade this holiday season at Clinique.com. I do want to ask you about both parts, but let's start with the creative part. I'm curious, what is your creative process? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of changes and evolves, but, these days as I try to become more consistent, I'll kind of wake up, do some breath work, meditate, and then I'll just have a coffee and jump into writing for as long as like my brain can handle it. And then at some point I'll have given all I can give and then I'll switch to like emails. And the trick is like, don't get into emails for me anyways, don't get into emails early because as soon as you start reading, your head starts spinning in that side of your brain. It's really hard to get back into the creative.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I do now. And sometimes I'll write really late at night, kind of when the world's asleep. I used to have this little writing shack on my property and I'd go in there and it'd be like, I'd be surrounded by all my favorite inspirational things, typewriters and like paintings and books. And it was very inspiring. And so that really helped me kind of get in the flow. But, 2 of my books, I literally moved to Paris and rented a tiny apartment in the first that was up like 5 flights of stairs. It was an attic but it was beautiful. And the, windows opened over the rooftops of Paris. And I wrote all my books from there. I just drink coffee and write.
That is so cool. That sounds like that image is like a movie, right? It's like the writer in Paris, like renting a little room, but it's very romantic. And I mean, I can relate to this. Like, do you feel like your environment really inspires you? Like you have to feel good in your environment.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think everyone's different and some people can kind of put up that buffer and they really jump into their imagination. But I've always found the places I am are kind of real hacks to inspiration because, a place like Paris or a place like Brooklyn or New Orleans or like, I think every city's got their kind of inspiration hidden deep within. But, if you can like hook onto that, the words this is just from my perspective, they flow, you just kind of look around and say what you're feeling, say what you're seeing. And it's just it's almost like a cheat.
No, I totally understand. Do you ever look back at your like first or second books or any previous works and you're like, wow, I wouldn't write that now? Or like, like it was like your mind was in a different place because it was inspired by that location.
Yeah, I do. I think I try to honor like where I was in those positions, or in those places. But yeah, totally. I mean, again, the writer's curse. It's like I struggle with everything I've written and nothing's finished, and like I change everything. And
yeah,
I think it's a story as old as time.
Yeah, totally get it. So, out of in your regular life now, like how much time is spent writing, and how much time is spent doing like other things, the business side and everything else?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. It's like if I got a book coming up, it commands a lot of time, and I think it was like 60%. When I don't have a book going in the funnels, it's more like 20% of the time. So basically I should write much more than I do. And I get mad at myself because I don't, you see someone like Stephen King who can just put out a couple books a year and it's just astonishing, really.
Yeah. I mean, no need to compare yourself. I think you're doing great.
I would never compare myself to Stephen King in a real way.
He literally has that book on writing. Like he's like an expert on
Yeah,
writing.
yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, that's an amazing book for anyone looking for
Yeah.
just kind of like tips and tricks. Stephen King on writing. Yeah, good suggestion. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about that real quick. What are your like, I guess, favorite books that you share with writers or creatives?
I mean, Jack Kerouac on the road for sure. You know,
Mhm.
there's some really beautiful Mary Oliver books. If you're not familiar with her, she's like a very well known like nature poet who
Mm.
passed away not too long ago, unfortunately. But yeah, there's some great Robert Frost, Walt Whitman. You know, I gravitate towards like the kind of Hunter S. Thompsons and Bukowskis, but less so these days. They're like, I find them pretty dark these days. And then, you know, Sylvia Plath, and
Mhm.
I love Fitzgerald. I don't know if you like, if
Yeah.
you read any Fitzgerald, the Gatsby, and his prose I find is just lyrical and poetic. And I could just read Fitzgerald quotes for forever. I mean, I think he's one of the most beautiful writers in the history, honestly.
Yeah, amazing. I love the way you talk about writers because you're on another level on how much you appreciate the craft. And it makes me more curious as you're writing your poetry, does it just flow or do you like deconstruct sentences? You know, how do you come up with things?
I mean, it's a really good question. I think I have like a notepad on my phone. And so like, as I'm going through life, I'll write down like little sparks of ideas, like, you know, see something and it's like, I know it could be a spark of a poem or it's a concept or it's a turn of phrase. And I'll just store that. And then I'll come back to it in like a more of a writing session and kind of try to build them out. And some of them work, some of them don't. And I don't think it's the right method, but I'm very kind of ADHD in a sense of like jumping around a lot
Mm,
between poems. Like,
mhm.
that one's not working. I'm going to jump to the next one. I'm going to jump to the next one. And that's just kind of how my mind works. And I always look at the writers who can just like sit down and write in a straight line. And,
I'm like, is that a myth? Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of like editing and I don't know.
yeah, I mean, I think so. You know, you hear kind of rumors of how the Stephen Kings and the Martin, Game of Thrones, and, you know, those kind of writers, but it is a myth for me. So
I'm curious, do you have dreams of writing anything like long form? Like whether it's a novel or a script or I don't know, just wondering.
yeah, I do
Oh, very
actually.
cool.
I'm, believe it or not, halfway through a novel. Yeah. And I love
Ooh.
to finish it. And then I have a grand dreams of coming out with some children's books,
Mm,
some really
love
fun
that.
children's books. That'll be a bit of a departure, but, yeah, I'm very excited about at those ones as well. Cause yeah, I think it'd be fun. You know, it's just like I'm always looking for the kind of new next fun way to be creative and bring like my whole thing in life is like I really love
Yeah.
poetry and I love bringing more poetry into the world however I can through merch I make like jewelry and clothes and you know the wine. I feel like wine is poetry and I've loved building out that brand because it is wine and poetry go so well together. And I haven't really told anyone this, but I'm launching a coffee line called Poet. And
Ooh,
yeah, I'm excited about that
very
too. You
cool.
know, it's just like I just kind of follow my passions and like I drink a lot of coffee and I wanted some really high quality coffee that was similar to the coffee that I'd
Mm,
always drink in Europe and that I couldn't ever find in America and that would just like help me
wow.
write really
Yeah.
well. I mean, you know, I might just be kind of more sensitive to this stuff, but like I find the right cup of coffee will either make my writing session or not. And
Yeah, you're very particular.
yeah, I know. And it's
No, that's
so,
awesome though. I love it. It's a
yeah,
whole lifestyle, this aesthetic, this poet, this like I love it.
it's fun. I'm having fun.
Can you share your favorite piece that you've ever written?
I can. I wonder if I could bring it up here. So,
Yeah.
you caught me off guard. And by the way,
Give us a real reading, a live reading.
yeah, by the way, I'm terrible just like in general at remembering my own poetry. I think that's
Oh,
like,
it's okay.
you know,
I'm sure you've
why
written
I write it
so
down.
much stuff. It's yeah.
But this one, happens to be on my desktop. So I'll read it for you. And it's called My Fate. And I use it as, I've ordained a couple weddings for
Mm,
friends and people. And I've used it as a wedding prayer.
nice.
So it's called My Fate. Does the sun promise to shine? No, but it will. Even behind the darkest clouds, it will. And no promise will make it shine longer or brighter, for that is its fate, to burn until it can burn no more. So to love you is not my promise, it is my fate, to burn for you until I can burn no more.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I actually wrote it for my little sister and her husband when they got married. And so it's got sentimental value for me. And I've used it at a few
Yeah.
other weddings now. And yeah, I just kind of like the idea of someone's fate is like my fate is to love you kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it so much. Even you reading it live, like, I get little goosebumps because, like, I feel
Oh,
it, you know?
oh, you're so cute. Thank you.
It's so interesting what poetry, what art can do.
It
Okay.
is quite remarkable, isn't it? Just like, sorry, I know you were going
No,
to say
go
something, but
go for it.
yeah, it's like the emotion that music can bring out from us, or even like seeing a painting and what that can feel like, or photography or dance, or whatever it is. It's like art
Yeah,
has this
yeah.
real language to say what words can't.
Yeah, and I even think there's, like, if in there's, like, a vibration of the piece, like, a vibration in your voice, obviously, but, like, in the words themselves that, like, take you somewhere else. If you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely. It's
yeah,
yeah,
so
it kind of
interesting.
transports you from your like reality into somewhere else to elicit some other powerful feeling.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love it.
yeah, it's almost like we're entering your flow a as you were writing the piece.
Oh, that's cool.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's true. It's like it's like when Adele sings her song, you're kind of
You're
like
in.
you're in there with her.
Yeah.
You're in that breakup, and yeah,
Yeah, yeah. You're in another world with her.
yeah,
I love it.
it's really powerful, and it also connects
Okay,
people.
I have another question. Um, what is a piece that you wrote where the reception surprised you? Like, maybe you're like, "Oh, this one's not that good," and people love it, or the opposite? Has there been, like, any surprising
Yeah, I
pieces?
had this really long poem, and it's actually in my new book, LVOE. It's called Love Her But Leave Her Wild. And it was so funny because I'd posted it once, like years ago, and someone just kind of took the title and ran with it. And then like someone got it tattooed, and then another person got it tattooed. And they just took that title, and like it became the most tattooed poem
Wow.
by far of mine, Love Her But Leave Her Wild. And that was a real surprise. It's like that they kind of created their own meaning behind it.
Mhm.
And I love that. So like this is the first time I'm getting to chance to post or to share and publish the longer version of it, which I'm excited.
Oh, so you didn't even share the long version yet? You only shared that line?
I mean, I think it's been on my Instagram years back, but
Oh, I see.
I've never since then shared the full version. And so it's kind of exciting to to share that with the world. But yeah, that was very surprising for me.
Awesome. I do wanna ask a little bit more about your anonymity. So I'm curious, how anonymous do you remain about your poet identity in real life? Like, do people in your life know that you're Atticus? And how do you ensure everyone keeps it a secret?
Yeah, I'm like careful about it. Like if I don't know somebody, I'm not going to say anything. But if someone's close to me at this point, and someone mentions something,
Mhm.
then I'm very open about it. I'm not too shy about it. And the reason being is that like for me, more than anything is
Mhm.
like, well, for one thing, people I trust are people I trust. And two is that, it's very symbolic for me. It's become like a symbol for me of like, in proud protest to fame and recognition, I'm trying to say, spread art without fame. Like, why do you want to be famous? So you get given free things. So you sell a few more books. So you get like brand deals. It's like, you can have a lot of happiness and fulfillment without
Mhm.
being recognized, and you know, those like little bits of dopamine you get when somebody's like, oh, hey, you know, like you're this person, just from my friends who are famous. I think it's kind of like a drug, and it's a little bit dangerous. And so for me, it's a big experiment, and you know, maybe it won't work, but I'm very proud to be anonymous, and I for the foreseeable future will always stay anonymous.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. Even in my experience, I'm not that people recognize me on the street. I'm actually like, although it might happen once in a while, but I'm actually happy that I can live my life like a normal person. Even if I am
Yeah,
known online, I like still having that ability, because if you were like an A-list celebrity, like there's so much that you can't do in public,
yeah.
right? So yeah, I think fame is not it's really not that great. It's not what people make it out to be.
Yeah, and then like, by the way, it works really, really well for some people. They can control it,
Mhm.
and you know, they're very social people, and so they like live on that energy. I think it gets dangerous for when people are more creative and
Mhm.
insular, and they're, you know, less
Yeah.
social, and they get this huge amount of fame, and suddenly like people are always kind of vying for their attention and coming up. And I think that's where it gets really dangerous. People like Heath Ledger, who's like such an incredible, wonderful actor, but he's like he was like a very insular person. And I think fame it was tricky, you know, it
Mhm.
was really hard on him. And yeah.
Yeah. Um, are there ever times that you regret wearing the mask and being anonymous, or are you completely like, it's been great?
Yeah. You know, it's like sometimes I'm like, am I being like truly authentic? Am I saying like be vulnerable and then I wear a mask? And is that a kind of contradiction? And, you know, and my God, it would just make my life so much so much easier. You know, it'd be nice to just be on video with you here. It's just like, you know, I find that that's how I kind of relate to people, is just meeting them one on one and kind of like laughing and smiling and whatnot.
Mhm.
And, you know, people like my publisher are like, hey, you'd sell way more books. You'd be way more famous. We could get you on the Today Show and yada, yada. So, you know, there are
Right.
times when I'm like, oh God, it'd just be so much easier to not be. But, you know,
Right.
it's like, I just got to remind myself, it's like, well, to what ends? You know, it's like, am I doing it for the right reasons? And, you know,
Mhm.
there's an actor, and has a famous quote that says, if you want to become rich and famous, become rich first and see if you still want to be famous. And I think there's something to that. Not that money has the answers to anything, but I think it's just kind of like a
Mhm.
warning of like, what are you looking for? Are you looking for success, or are you looking for people to recognize you on a street? So
Right. I think people think they want to be famous, but what they want is just the success that fame brings. So
yeah, exactly.
yeah, you can have money without fame.
Yeah, you can. I mean,
Mhm.
you know, I would wager that many people that don't have fame or money are living much higher qualities of life
Right.
than very, very wealthy, famous people. You know, and
Yeah,
like I said, there's
definitely.
tons of exceptions. I know a lot of very, very famous people who live wonderful and fulfilled and balanced lives. They're able to kind of manage it really, really well. But yeah, I mean, I think it would be tricky for me, you know, who just like loves to, you know, walk in the grocery store and be kind of a goof, and or like walk down a little street in Paris and take pictures of weird things, you know. I think if I was getting recognized all the time, it would be for the wrong reasons.
Right, right. And even if you think of writers traditionally, it's like they're famous for their work, not for like they're not people you recognize on the street anyway. And it's like you want to focus people towards your art.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think this helps keep it about the words and less about who I am. And one thing I've always loved,
Right,
so
right.
I on one of these signings that I did where I showed up in a mask, I had kind of like a reflective mask going on. And this
Mhm.
woman stood up at the end and she goes, I don't know why you chose to wear a mask, but I love that it's reflective. So, because I think people can see themselves in you.
That's so metaphorical for your work, because your work is a mirror for people. Wow, I see it.
Yeah, it's like so beautiful. I was like, oh God, can I have that? Can I use
Yeah.
it as a poem or like you're?
You definitely use that somewhere. It's like Atticus is not a person. Atticus is the mirror for you to see yourself.
Yeah, I
Right?
think it's beautiful, and it's like what I was talking about
Yeah.
with the tattoos. It's like Atticus can be whoever
Mhm.
you want him or her to be, and it's I love it when people kind of take the poetry, change the pronouns, mix up words, like make it theirs, and it's like they're making it a mirror, and that's what's
Mhm.
important. But it's not like it doesn't matter who I am, it really doesn't. It's
Right,
about the words.
right.
You either like them or you don't, and if you don't, that's all good.
I love that idea of like you create the art, but it's not yours. Like it can become someone else's. So do you, I know as a creative, you can get tied with your work, like your self-worth gets tied up with your work where like if people don't like it, you feel bad about yourself. Do you still have that or do you kind of like post it and like give it away and don't like are you able to detach or do you still have that attachment?
I would say I'm able to detach more than a lot of people just because of the anonymity. I think I try not to take as much personally, and I'm insulated from it a bit. But yeah, I mean, I think we're all just human, and I think we can still get affected by it. Or if someone says something cool, and you're just,
Right.
it's like a dagger, and I just think that's that's just how it works. It's hard to be always stoic about these things, but a great power if you are.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to shift the conversation to talk about the business side. How did you turn your art into a business? Because you have so many things going on. You have a whole shop. You mentioned like the coffee, the wine. I guess what were the first steps? What's your entrepreneurship story?
Like I said, I think it all stems from like a real interest in both sides. Like, I really just enjoy both sides of it. And, I think it was very important to me from the beginning that anything that I do be one, really authentic, and two, like I'm very passionate about it. And so the merchandise is like, we take a lot of care in what we create. It's like not just pop sockets and things like that. We really, it takes a long time to create these items, and we're really careful about it, and each piece of jewelry and shirt and whatnot.
Mm.
And then for the wine, it was the same thing. It's like I was writing so much about wine and vineyards and that kind of lifestyles that it was just such a natural thing I felt for me to be like I'm very passionate about wine. I love drinking red wine and rosé, and it just kind of made sense, and it was authentic. And that was a partnership with a wine subscription service called Wink. They're like one of the bigger ones in America, WINC, and we have a brand together called Lost Poet Wine. And so that's where that business came from. And the coffee was the same. It's like I realized that I just wanted higher quality coffee. And I started this company with actually one of Elon Musk's cousins, really, really wonderful guy, and a few other partners. And it's all completely electric, digital roasting, zero
Oh,
emissions.
cool.
Yeah, all
I didn't even
yeah,
think
yeah,
about
I
that
know. I
for
mean,
coffee.
we're kind of leading the
Yeah.
world charge on this. And yeah, it's like, it's completely zero emissions, and all the farmers are female, women-owned farms in South America. And, it's been amazing to just like this journey of kind of coming up with the highest quality possible coffee that we can come up with. And the incredible thing about doing small batch, high iteration coffee is that you're iterating like 10 times a day. And so you're refining the taste of a coffee 10 times a day. And Starbucks probably doesn't do that in a year. So you get a real advantage of doing these small batch, high iteration, and the kind of, I think the flavor, taste of this coffee is incredible because it doesn't have any of those gas fumes that all coffee roasting has always had. It's not roasted over with gas burners. It's roasted, with electric heat. So I
Yeah.
just think the whole experience is wonderful. But again, I'm biased. Do you drink coffee or wine?
I'm more of a tea drinker. I don't love I'm so sensitive to caffeine.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yes.
I would
I
love to
know.
try
So,
it because it's, like, made in a different way, and it's, like, the thought that you put into it, that's so interesting.
well, I don't want you to like fire you up so much, but with with too much
I can
coffee. But
still
you can
drink
take like a
them.
little,
Yeah.
you can take a little sip. I'll
Yeah, I
send you
can
some, and
definitely
I'd
try
love to
it.
know what you think. But maybe I'll get into tea
I
after.
love that. Thank you. That's amazing. So it sounds like you find partners to like start these different business concepts with. Like what is the main role that you play in these businesses then? Like are you really involved in the product? Is it more just marketing?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. I'm someone who likes to do a lot of things. And so part of why I think I've been able to do a lot of things is bringing in the right people and getting the right partners excited and not being scared to kind of share in the returns, and
Mhm.
get everyone incentivized and working towards a common goal. And I think when you do that, you're able to do a lot of different things. And so both coffee, merch, wine, all the books, they're all things that have really incredible teams behind them. And they're, I would say, partners that we grow it together. And so I do a lot of the marketing, the kind of branding, the kind of conceptually, the ideation and kind of the more experiential stuff and weaving poetry throughout it, and then leave the building for the pros, like the people who are roasting the coffee are the best in the world. That they came from that company Blue Bottle. They're the best of the best of the best. They're so passionate about coffee, and I follow them. And the wine was the same thing. It's like the best. It was a group of master somms that came together, and we came up with the exact wine we want. And that's why, like, if you go, it's not just a white label. These things
Mhm.
are started years before
Yeah.
and spend a lot of time. And that's why the wine's got like a 90, 92 rating, which is kind of
Mhm.
unheard of for California Red first blend. It's like came out of nowhere. And the coffee is too. It's like it's already being considered for all these awards, and it like hasn't even been released yet. I mean, I think you can find it secretly, but yeah. So it's just like care and attention, and I think people recognize that, and you just want these things to be real and authentic. And the last thing I'd want is for someone to think that it was just a white label.
Mhm.
It's like we got Starbucks coffee. I'm harping on Starbucks, so it's
Just
kind of me.
change the
But
label.
I think
Yeah.
let's just like
No, I
buy
get it
bulk
though.
beans and put a yeah, that's kind of what I was
Right.
fighting against,
Exactly.
honestly, of why I started the coffee journey. And yeah.
And I'm curious, so is it like you came up with the coffee idea first and then you found these people? Or did these people like kind of pitch you, hey, do you want to make a wine or a coffee?
It happened in different ways. So the wine, I knew the CEO and we were friends of friends, and we just kind of started talking, and I'd always wanted to do a wine, and I can't remember who said it first, but either I was like, hey, we should explore doing a wine, or he was like, hey, I love your brand, and would you want to do a wine together? And that's how
Mhm.
it started. And the coffee was the same thing. Atticus was quite well established at that point, and I'd always been interested to do teas or coffee just because I was so passionate about it. And my friend was starting this like all electric roasting zero emission company, and he's like, "Oh, we should do this together." That company's called Bellwether,
That's
and
cool.
that's who
Yeah.
makes Poet Coffee. But
Oh,
yeah,
awesome.
that's kind of how it happened. It was very serendipitous, but I think the greatest lesson that I've learned is that you put those things out in the world, and you'd be amazing what comes back to you. You just kind of, people want to connect dots. They want to make things happen, and people love it, So it's like, if you have a dream like that, don't be afraid to kind of talk about it. And,
Mhm.
there is power in holding things close, but there's also a real power in just like utilizing your network, talking to people and sharing your dreams so people can help you.
Yeah. I think this is amazing because I think so many creatives out there don't know how to turn their art into business. And then this, like your story of it's not just you doing everything. You find the right people and you focus on the part that you want to focus on. I think that's a key lesson. Do you have any other advice you can give to creators out there?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it like helps not to be, like I said, I think you nailed it actually. It's just like find people who kind of are better at those things and more passionate at those things than you are. And, stick to the things that you're really, really passionate about.
Mm.
If you're a writer, find someone who in your network that like creates prints and like loves creating prints or art or whatever, and kind of partner with them on things. And anything you can do at first, it's just like a hustle and a grind. And I think sometimes people are kind of locked by their own indecision, and they're just like so precious with everything that they won't kind of make any decisions because they're so scared to make the wrong decision. And I've made so many wrong decisions. I continue to make wrong decisions all the way along. And it's kind of like you just
Yeah.
bounce off the walls and you're like, okay, well, that didn't work. Let's try something else. It's like Winston Churchill said that success is going from failure to without losing your
Mhm.
enthusiasm. And I think that's an important part.
Yeah. Love that.
The other thing is my business coach had some really good advice the other day. And it's like, there's figuring out like where your genius is, like what like really gives you energy. What are you better at than everyone else? And really kind of leaning into those kind of passions and is really important. And kind of as soon as you can, and like we all have to do it when we're starting out, but like as soon as you can, just like find the things that take away so much of your energy and they're just like impossible to do. And, you just
Yeah.
hate doing it, and try to outsource those to someone, find a partner, for some people, it's like accounting or like bookkeeping or invoicing. It's like find someone to do those things because it'll make you so much, it'll free up your whole soul. And
Mhm.
for me, it was posting every day. Like I was very bad at just like batch scheduling and whatever. And I'd honestly say that was one of the key turn points is like, I just found people who were kind of enjoyed it. That they're like happy to get paid to go through all the poems, get them ready, schedule them and post them.
Yeah.
And that was incredible for me. So it's just those kind of little things that allow you to stay in your genius and continue doing what you do best, really.
I love that so much. I'm in the process of that. There are parts of my business that I still work on, but I'm like, I need to find someone to help me with this because it's not my genius,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's imperfect and we all kind of have to do the things we don't want to do a lot of the time. But, I think it's something to optimize for sure. What are the things
Mhm.
that you just hate doing?
I mean, like anything operations and logistics side, admin, book, accounting and bookkeeping as well. I definitely, I am a creative. Like I love creating
Yeah.
content. I also love writing. I love like being on camera
Cool.
and things like that. But it's everything behind the scenes. There's a lot behind
Yeah.
the scenes that I like. I do have people helping me, but I think I'm still searching for key, I guess, higher level people to help, kind of like your partners, like people like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you should you should say it on the podcast. Like, what exactly are you looking to fill? And maybe someone's listening.
Yeah,
They'll email
I
you
should. Yeah,
or put it in your show notes.
You're right. You're right. I should put it out there
Put it
more.
out in the world.
You're right. You're right. Okay. Okay. So I do want to talk about your book, LVOE. Do you
Yeah.
pronounce it love or do you just say it LVOE?
I mean, I do both. It's like I call it love and I also call it LVOE. But
Okay.
yeah, the idea behind it was, in my definition of love is an imperfect thing. And I wanted to kind of show that imperfection. And I've always said that love is two imperfect things coming together to make something beautiful. And it's about kind of seeing past those imperfections. And, we look at that cover and a lot of us see love, we see love, even though it says LVOE and, especially if you're kind of dyslexic like I am, but you kind of can see past the imperfections and see love. And I really wanted to celebrate that because I really do truly believe that that's in the definition of love.
Yeah. What excites you the most about this new book?
So one is, do you have a copy, by the way? I'll make sure I get you one if you don't. Okay, cool. Yeah. So if you touch it, it's like so soft, which I love. It's like touching butter. And I love how the reflective, like every time you take a picture of it, it's like a different book. It's just the builders of the book did it so beautifully. And so it has like my first three books, it's different. This is the first departure. But instead of photographs, I partnered with Daniel Winter, known as Winterstone on Instagram. And he's like one of the top tattoo artists, like thin line tattoo artists on the planet. And he did all the art, and each piece of art on this thing
Cool.
is, in this book is an actual tattoo. So off someone's skin.
Ooh,
Yeah.
very cool.
Yeah. So
Oh, nice.
I think that's like a really cool story. And I think it really brings the words alive. I think it's beautiful, and it goes really well with, like, half the poems are my handwriting. And I think that, it just all flows together really
Mm.
well. And the other thing is if you've read any of my first 3 books, is it's kind of like this battle through the dark towards the light. And I think that LVOE is the first time that it's like
Yeah.
steps out into the light, and it's like positive and happy and joyful. And I think that's just kind of more of like where I am in my life, honestly.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. It's reflective of what you're going through right now, because I heard that you are engaged, and so you're probably feeling like in the clouds, right?
Yeah, I am. She's wonderful, and she's a cardiac nurse, and so she's mending hearts. We're both mending hearts in our own way,
Wow.
you know?
Oh my gosh. That's so
Yeah.
cool. Love
Mending
that.
broken hearts. And the other thing is, like, I don't know if you've noticed, but if you look at the book sideways, there's a really faint rainbow in the pages.
Mm.
And that's like the nod to the LGBTQ world, who are just like, they're like have been so wonderfully supportive of me. And I'm just wanted to kind of shout that back.
Aw, that's so sweet. Okay, so let's talk about love. Like, what is your advice for staying in love since you're engaged?
Yeah, staying in love or getting in love.
Yeah.
I think it's like two different things.
You wanna talk
Yeah.
about both?
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
go. Yeah, let's talk about finding love first and then staying in love.
Yeah. So the one thing I will say about getting in love is, and I'll equate it to some really good writing advice. And it was Bukowski who said, the best thing to do if you really want to write well is don't try. And, what he meant by that, I think, is that don't set out and put all this pressure on yourself and be like, I need to write the best piece of work that's ever been done right now. I mean, it's good to have goals, but it's also just like, it's hard when you kind of have that like block of like, this needs to be amazing to write something amazing. For me personally, and I know a lot of other people. And so the kind of idea of like, don't try, just like enjoy it, love it, like find your love for writing, and then the flow will come, I think is a really powerful advice. And as it equates to love, is the moment you stop looking so aggressively for love is so often when it arrives. And I think it's important to say that it's not about like not looking for love or putting blocks up for love, but it's like taking kind of pressure off yourself, working on yourself, which I think is the most powerful thing you can do.
Mhm.
Because, and I'm like, I've done this too. And I think a lot of us have done this, is like, sometimes when we're not feeling like completely ourselves or pieces are missing, we're so desperate to find someone to kind of fill those gaps in our soul. And I think it's a really the wrong way to enter a
Yeah.
relationship or to search for a relationship. I think the best thing you can possibly do is work on yourself and get to know yourself so well, feel so comfortable, so confident, so happy being yourself and like showing up in the world. And that energy that you create once you've kind of are going in that direction, it's intoxicating. It's like, this person is so comfortable with being themselves, and I want that in my, in my life. And you radiate it. And so I've always seen the people who are just like hustling for themselves. It's like they've got balance and they're coming into the world as a whole person. Those are the people that just like, whether they like it or not, just fall into a relationship, even if they're not searching for it. And so that's like kind of my best honest advice about how to find love. I truly do believe
Yeah.
that. And I know that it's worked for me and so many other people that I know that are in strong relationships. And then staying in love, I think it sounds trite, but it's working on it all the time. It's like doing the work. It's progressing yourself all the time. I find like I'm always like searching for like the next kind of growth class or like experience that I think will make me a better person, show up as a better person in the world. I'm always trying to optimize for kind of like family and relationship and kind of long-term happiness. And I think that's about balance and trust and safety And one of the greatest hacks, I think that's completely overshadowed often or forgotten is that, especially for men, some men find this almost impossible. And it's unfortunately just a product of how our generation was raised. And it's not the boys' fault. It's just how we were raised. But it's like the inability to be vulnerable and the idea that vulnerability is like a weakness. And I truly believe that the only way you can really find connection, true love is through like trust and vulnerability. The more vulnerable you are, you're kind of giving pieces of yourself to each other. That's very, very powerful.
Yeah, no, I completely love and agree with what you said. I think a lot of our listeners are female, and I'm sure, like, I can relate to being with, men who don't know how to be vulnerable. And so, do you have advice for the ladies from a male's perspective? Is there
Yeah.
anything we can do, or is it more of like you let them open up on their own time, sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard thing to push. And, I think the danger
Yeah,
of it is if you do push, it's like you kind of risk them shutting down or pulling away even more. And
exactly.
another thing I will add to that is like, it's such an imperfect science. And like, believe me, like this has been I'm like such a culprit. Like I used to have huge guards up my whole, younger dating life because of like past traumas and just like relationships with, the females in my life. And it's been this kind of like, slow growing up thing. And unfortunately, I think women like mature so much faster in so many ways than men. And they're also fostered by society to be more vulnerable. So I think it's like, it's a patience thing. I find that, that men, it takes often into their 30s plus to like really, you know, but one thing I've seen is that it really does happen for most men. They kind of like the path towards vulnerability and just like, you know, it does happen. It just kind of takes a while. And unfortunately, I
Mm,
think it's like just a part of men's testosterone reducing and stuff. But, have patience with the men in your
right.
lives is what I would say. And again, like
Okay.
do the work, it's like, there's these incredible like classes, like, you may have heard of them, but they're things like Landmark and Hoffman and the Atlas Project. And,
Mhm.
those are kind of like, super master classes in vulnerability. So like, I would definitely encourage either going yourself and then,
Mm.
from there, encouraging the men in your life to go do something like that. I found that kind of thing really, really helps. Anything hard opening is very, very powerful. And all of those things, they might seem expensive or whatever, but there are scholarships. There are like, for people who are listening that thinks it's out of reach, there's lots of kind of scholarship options and things like that. So
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like you have to work on yourself, like do the work yourself first. And then in time, being a better person individually will end up in a better relationship. And also, another thing I do want to add is like, I found that you have to be vulnerable first if you want someone else to open up. It's like you lead by example in a way.
yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. I mean, I truly believe that the best thing you can do is like, if you continue to grow, they're going to either be inspired by it or like follow the lead or like, or whatever, or you're going to grow way past them and evolve way past them and just be like, you know what, this relationship isn't evolving in the way I want it to. And I don't think I should be in this relationship anymore. And I think that that's a really powerful thing too, because if you're just working on yourself throughout your relationship and you're kind of continuing to grow, you're going to be in a really
Yeah.
good place to know, this is kind of a non-constructive, non-supportive relationship. And you're going to have the confidence to be like, I'm out of here. It's like, you're not treating me the way I feel like I deserve to be treated, and I'm out of here. And so
Yeah.
you're totally right, and work on yourself. And that's the magic. Yeah. It's the hack. And it's at least for me.
Yeah. Okay, Atticus, if you were to leave the listeners with one final thought, whether it's words of advice or just anything you want to put out into the world, what would it be?
I would say so many people have words inside them. And I say words, but it could be art, it could be paintings, it could be songs, it could be dance. And so many people die with those words inside them. And so I would say, don't let that art stay inside. Put them down on paper, put them out in the sound waves, or write them in a book. And don't be afraid what the world thinks, because life's far too short.
So beautiful. As an artist, as a creative, like I love hearing that. I agree, everybody. Just create. Don't judge yourself. Just create and put it out there. And yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So where can we find you online?
You can just Google Atticus Poetry. I'm on Atticus Poetry on Instagram and all the socials, Pinterest, you name it. The wine's called Lost Poet. The coffee's called Poet Coffee. And find me anywhere. Message me, DM me, say hi.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really enjoyed this conversation.
You're welcome.
Everyone, make sure you check out Atticus Poetry. We'll link everything that he mentioned in the show notes down below.
Amazing. Thanks, Eileen.